Hello and welcome back to the Frogs of War podcast. I'm Anthony North. That's Russ Hodges. And we've got a big packed show tonight. We've got TCU basketball leading up into the Big 12 tournament, baseball coming off a big weekend series and midweek game, and lots of other things going around TCU. But first, thanks to Russ for last week stepping in and taking that podcast by himself. I was, and all of you Fort Worth folks and DFW area, North Texas, I hope everyone came out of the storm okay from last Thursday. Came through pretty hard for us. I got trapped in a parking garage. So about the time Russ was texting me, hey, we're going to be ready to record tonight. And, I was stuck in a parking garage, couldn't leave. There was stuff blowing all over the streets. Eventually got myself home and power was on and off, trees down all over. Actually lost 3 trees in my yard, just snapped off right from the trunk. Quite a storm, Russ up there in what you call Windy City. I don't know. It was pretty windy down here in Fort Worth last week. How are you doing this week? How's it going up there?
You know what? I couldn't complain a whole lot about the mid-50s sunny, nice weather that we had this past week. No tornado alarms going off up here in the Chicagoland area. So glad to hear everything's all right and excited to get back into this podcast here. And like you said, we got a lot to talk about and some breaking news type stuff to talk about as well. So eager to get into it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sad I missed last week's podcast. I had my Beat Texas shirt all set out. I was going to be all ready for our video coming off that win over the Longhorns. But this week, the TCU basketball took on Oklahoma in Norman to close the regular season with an opportunity to have a winning record in conference play. I'm not sure TCU's done that yet in the Big 12, but it would have been a nice little treat to go get that win, go get another season sweep on this season. But TCU laid a pretty big egg up there to the last place team in the Big 12, which, of course, we have to caveat that last place team in the Big 12 is still better than most teams in college basketball. Oklahoma is still a pretty strong team, but and they're in that road environment in Norman. However, that's a game TCU needs to be able to come away with. So it's a disappointing close to the season. TCU loses 60-74. Another case of TCU not having its full roster, not looking at full strength. We certainly have more to talk about with that later on here. But Russ, this game in Norman, how did this happen that TCU just kind of fell flat there?
Yeah, Oklahoma came out and got really good performances from Groves and Sherfield. Both guys had 20-plus in this game, and the Frogs just came out and couldn't get anything going offensively. It was just one of those games where TCU's fast break offense was almost non-existent, and despite a couple of good individual performances, Mike Miles was in double figures, Damian Baugh, had another all-around game, but TCU fell behind early, really struggled in the half court, and it was a 17-point game, I think, at halftime with Oklahoma ahead. And the second half, TCU played a little bit better, but it was just way too much to get out of the hole that they put themselves in early in the game. And it was kind of a fitting end to the regular season, I think, for the Frogs finishing 9-9 in the Big 12 Conference. And it's kind of emblematic of how the season has gone for TCU, and that there have been some really high highs with the dominant wins against teams like Oklahoma State and Kansas and even Oklahoma earlier in the year. You have good wins over teams like Providence and Iowa and Utah, but you have some really low lows. You have the loss to Mississippi State. You have two losses to Iowa State. You have this loss to Oklahoma. And it just seems like the continuity, you mentioned that the Frogs didn't have their full roster for this game, and um, the continuity as a whole for TCU just hasn't been there this year. And this year was about running it back, right? TCU makes the NCAA tournament last year, gets into the second round as a 9 seed, fights to the end against Arizona, the number 1 seed, goes to overtime, just comes up a little bit short. All the guys who could have potentially declared, they come back, and the whole idea was about running it back. You know, this team with that experience, everyone taking steps forward, role players getting better, starters getting better. This team has a chance to make some noise, and we've seen glimpses of that throughout the year, but it also feels like with injury issues and rotation changes, it's almost like every game there's a different starting five. There are different guys coming off the bench. You had Micah Peavy missed some games earlier in the year with an injury. Mike Miles has missed a lot of time with injuries. Eddie Lampkin has missed time with injuries and other issues. And I keep saying continuity, and that's just the thing that I feel TCU hasn't had this year that some of these other teams in the Big 12 have. They haven't dealt with the same kind of injuries. They haven't dealt with the same kind of, let's say, off the court issues. And that's why TCU's season has been almost like a roller coaster. I joke that it's like the life is like a box of chocolates because you never know what you're going to get. I mean, you have the 100-point dominant win over Oklahoma State, and then you shoot 30% from the field against Kansas after that. You have one of your biggest wins of the season, home finale against Texas. You win that game, and then you follow that up with one of your worst losses of the season at Oklahoma. So it's really frustrating because you see what this team could be, and I just don't think this team will be able to fully realize its potential, you know, at this point in the season. And you hope that the Frogs can make some noise here in the Big 12 tournament, but Steven Johnson did a nice little column with the Star-Telegram where he talked about, you know, what version of TCU is going to show up for this tournament. Are we going to get the TCU that plays with great pace and great energy and great perimeter defense, can get up and down the floor and score in transition and get easy buckets? Or is this going to be the TCU that goes ice cold in the half court and couldn't throw a grape in the water if they were on a boat? You know, a team that has just kind of struggled shooting the ball from the field all year, and there have been issues at times as well with turnovers and free throws, and it's just hard to really say what kind of team we're going to get in this tournament. I hope for the best, but it was a really frustrating loss on Saturday, especially because I felt like after beating Texas, if they beat Oklahoma, they would have, in my opinion at least, solidified a 5 seed for the NCAA tournament. I feel like the Frogs right now are kind of on the fence now after losing that game between a 5 and a 6, and if they lose in this first round matchup to Kansas State, kind of a toss-up. I really don't know where they would be. I'm a little conservative on that evaluation, but a missed opportunity in this Oklahoma game, and I feel like there have just been many of those this year, unfortunately, for the Frogs.
Yeah, and for the season, the Jekyll and Hyde of it for TCU to have you're only swept by Iowa State in the season series, but you only get a season sweep of Texas Tech. So, you know, you get road wins at Kansas, at Baylor. You get that opportunity to get those season sweeps over those top teams in the conference, and not able to do it. You end up falling at the end against Texas in Austin. Those games where the Frogs really had a chance to have a much better season than they have. And it's really unfortunate that that haven't been able to capitalize on all this talent on this roster. But there's still a lot more to play for. There's certainly this Big 12 tournament, plenty to happen here. And then TCU will not have a nervous selection Sunday. That the Frogs will be in the tournament. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. But like you say, the seeding could continue to be a question here. A win on Thursday against Kansas State, TCU is definitely a 5 seed. I think that's pretty fair and safe to say. Maybe looking at a 4 seed, I think you probably have to win 2 games to get up to looking at a 4 seed. It's going to be tough. I mean, I think, I tend to write about this like twice a week. So it's one of the things. I see all these teams and I don't know that anything can happen to drop Indiana out of the way, to drop Virginia, Tennessee. Gonzaga just won the West Coast Conference. So there's not much upward movement available for TCU without a serious run. But you get 2 wins in this tournament and you could be in better shape there. Where a loss, is it possible TCU drops to a 7 seed? I think it's possible. I think it is possible. I mean, particularly if they look terrible in this game against Kansas State, if it comes out with a really gross final score like the game in Manhattan where Kansas State ran away with it late for a 3-touchdown victory, 21 points there is a bad look in basketball. So after losing by 2 touchdowns against Oklahoma, it's not good. So I think 6 seed is probably where TCU sits, which is kind of funny because 6 seed is where TCU was when they first made the tournament under Dixon a few years ago. And I don't think that team was nearly as good as this team or had nearly as good a season as this team has had. So I think that maybe that team was overseeded, clearly went out and got beat by Syracuse in that first game after Syracuse advanced from the play-in game. But I can see the same kind of thing happening here. TCU could definitely get into the NCAA tournament as a 6 seed and then get matched up against a top-level mid-major champion, Charleston or Florida Atlantic or somebody like that, Oral Roberts maybe even, and have a lot of trouble, or one of these fringe bubble teams that, actually has a lot of talent but has had a terrible season, something like, I don't know, Michigan or North Carolina, and things get difficult for the Frogs. So it's the best time of the year. There's so much, these tournaments are super fun, I think. But losing the Oklahoma game, I think is it's a big pain point because it really makes it difficult to jump up to that 4 seed, where if you're in a top 4 seed, you have just a much, much easier and the historical evidence of being able to go far in the tournament is much significantly greater at the 4 seed than it is from 5 through 9, where it's pretty much a toss up either way. So moving on to the Big 12 tournament that has tipped off tonight, Wednesday night in Kansas City. First game already, the West Virginia took down Texas Tech in the first game. And right now, as we're talking, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are playing in their first round matchup to see who makes it to the quarterfinals. But for TCU, earning, or I guess falling into that 6th seed, matches up the Frogs with the Kansas State Wildcats. Thursday late night, the last game of the evening there. Russ, where do you want to go with this? I mean, I think certainly Kansas State has a really strong roster. Those two guards are incredible, but TCU took them down pretty well in Fort Worth, and then had a struggle with them in Manhattan without Mike Miles. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think Mike Miles being back for this game will be a huge difference, but I think we have to talk about the absence of Eddie Lampkin for this game. And if you remember earlier in the season when TCU beat Kansas State, I believe it was 82-68, Lampkin was really, really good in that game for TCU. He was active. He was scoring out of the low post. He was rebounding the ball well. Second time around, he was still trying to work his way back from the ankle injury. I think he played about 15 to 20 minutes and just had no real impact on the game. And Kansas State wound up running away from it. And like you said, running up 3 touchdowns on the Frogs in the second half. But we do have to talk about some news that broke earlier today regarding Eddie Lampkin. It was reported that he did not travel with the team for the Big 12 tournament. Jamie Dixon reportedly was made aware of that early Tuesday, and after the report that Lampkin did not travel with the team, there was a social media post shared on Eddie's Instagram where some screenshotted text messages were shared. I believe one of them was between Eddie's mother and Dixon, and a couple more between what looked like Eddie himself and an assistant coach, where this situation it's being described as a personal leave from the team, a mental health situation, and all we know right now is Eddie Lampkin will not be playing in the Big 12 tournament. He will not be with the team. We don't know how long he'll be gone. We don't know if this is a permanent thing. We're just going off of what's been reported so far. But all I will say about this is let's not jump to conclusions or rush to judgment with anything that has been alleged in this situation. The reporting suggests that there are allegations of racist remarks made by Coach Dixon. There's more that's going to come out about this, I believe, in the near future. A story like this isn't just something that I feel gets swept under the rug. I believe there will be more reporting done on this, and for all we know, we might find out more at some point during this tournament through media interviews or whatever. But if this truly is a mental health situation, and Eddie's taken a personal leave from the team, obviously we wish him the best. And these players are more than just athletes; they're also human beings, and so you gotta take care of your mentals, like Marshawn Lynch said. And hopefully everything is going all right with Eddie and his family, and we hope that this situation is not as bad as it looks. But I don't want to speculate any further than that. But in terms of this Big 12 tournament, not having Eddie Lampkin, obviously TCU is, in my opinion, a more energetic team and, frankly, a better team with Eddie Lampkin on the floor. Without him, I feel like it changes how you have to play. Xavier Cork has some experience starting in games where Eddie hasn't played, but Cork's impact on the game, in my view, is kind of inconsistent. You know, he has he gets into foul trouble pretty quickly. He plays limited minutes, and the Frogs, I think, are really going to have to sort of embrace small ball in this tournament and see what they can do with running more wing players on the floor. And maybe you look at starting Jacoby Coles at the 4, or playing a lot of minutes with Emmanuel Miller at the 5 and Jacoby Coles at the 4, and really trying to increase the pace of play and get up and down the floor and lean heavily on that great perimeter defense to create turnovers, increase that ball pressure, get out on the fast break, and really try to play fast, because you just don't have the size right now especially without Eddie Lampkin, to compete against many other teams, whether it's in the Big 12 or when TCU gets to the NCAA tournament. So it's a tough loss not having Eddie Lampkin for this particular matchup with Kansas State, knowing how well he played the first time around when he was healthy. The Frogs, as we know, have had a lot of success getting out in transition and playing with pace, but we also know that they struggle mightily in the half court when they're not able to do that. So I'm interested to see how this matchup goes. Like I said, I think having Mike Miles back will be a big boost, but we'll see what kind of lineup TCU goes with, and we'll see if they try to play big and give Xavier Cork or even Suleimani Doumbia some minutes, or do they go small? Do they play with Coles and Miller in the front court, a couple guys that can draw bigs away from the basket, and see how it goes from there? I'm not exactly sure, but it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing unfold tomorrow night.
Yeah, I know Drew, one of our Frogs of War writers, has been really banging the table for that death lineup, the small ball lineup. He's been kind of suggesting that as the way to go for some time, and we've seen Jacoby Coles really step up in a lot of ways. He's had a huge impact this season, and you got to think that there's some creative ways that TCU is going to have to roll lineups out there. I think. And yeah, Xavier Cork has been a fine contributor. I think some of the places where his game just clearly is not as strong as Eddie Lampkin's is in the rebounding department. He's just not as good a rebounder. It's just not as much of his ability as Eddie's is. I think Cork has some good ability at rim protection, good ability to score when given strong opportunities. But that's where we see those rebound numbers just get really lopsided when it's only Xavier Cork out there as the lone big, and it requires Damian Ball and the guards to pick up a lot of that rebounding slack, and it slows down that ability to run out off of those offense or the defensive rebounding. So, I think in this Oklahoma game, not only was the score TCU down by 14, but also on the rebounding totals, TCU was out rebounded by 14, which is a pretty massive difference in college basketball, I think. So I don't know how successful a death lineup would be. The full small ball, get your shooters out there and run Miller at the 5. But I think against Kansas State, I think it's a good opportunity. Maybe against a team like Oklahoma State, that's not what you would want to do. A team that runs out two bigs who can really work you on the offensive end and make life difficult for a smaller big. But I don't know that Kansas State, or if TCU were to win and to get the matchup with Texas, that's not really the kind of game that they play. So I think it's an opportunity there for some guys to come in and step up with Eddie, unfortunately, going to be unavailable for the team through this matchup. I will say, I think I'm a little bit disappointed that TCU ends up having to match up with Kansas State. Before going into the final weekend of the season and before the bracket was known, what the tournament bracket was going to look like, I had in my mind that I was going to pick Kansas State to win this tournament. I think Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson are just super talented and really fun to watch. I enjoy watching their games as well when they're not playing TCU. And playing in Kansas City, you get kind of a home court environment. It's going to be raucous there for the late game against TCU. I do think Kansas State certainly has the ability to run through to the finals of this Big 12 tournament, but I refuse to pick against TCU in this first round. So that's not where I went with our picks. On frogsawar.com, we put up some staff picks, and also Matthew put out his full game by game preview and prediction. So go check those out. But I do have TCU going ahead and winning this game, and moving on to take on maybe Texas, maybe Oklahoma State, but not ending up winning the Big 12 tournament. I think we did make those predictions before this information was made public about Eddie Lampkin. I think that really does limit the overall ceiling for TCU this season. And, you know, I think the other side of the bracket with Kansas and Baylor, I think probably the winner of that game is the winner, that the team that will come out on top at the end of the Big 12 tournament. Russ, where do you see, how is this Big 12 tournament going to play out? It's the best conference in college basketball. It's going to be high drama. It's going to be exciting. What do we see in Kansas City?
Yeah, I think this is what bothers me so much about losing to Oklahoma is I almost felt like TCU was a shoo-in to be the 5 seed for this tournament. And if you were to ask me between Texas, Baylor, and Kansas State, who would I want TCU to play ranked from best matchup to worst matchup, I would say Kansas State is the worst matchup of those 3. I would have really liked to see, I would say Texas, Baylor, Kansas State. That would have been my order. I really wanted to see a TCU-Texas rematch in the first round, but when you don't take care of business, you don't get to reap the rewards. So Iowa State jumping into the 5 seed because of that sweep. TCU falls to 6, and now they got to play Kansas State. And I'm admittedly picking TCU to win this game against Kansas State a little bit from a homer standpoint, because I want to see the matchup with Texas again, and I want to see TCU take down Texas in the semifinal round to get another matchup against Kansas. That close loss to Kansas, I felt like that was just such a missed opportunity, and I want that revenge. Not gonna lie, I want that revenge against the Jayhawks in the finals. But I really think that if TCU can get this one, if they can get this one win against Kansas State, there's no reason why TCU couldn't win this tournament. I think if you can compete with that kind of team, you can really do anything in this conference. But you go back to the point of what version of TCU is going to show up. Are we going to get the motivated, energized, excited TCU, or are we going to get the flat, cold, 30% from the field TCU? We don't know. But I have TCU winning this game. I have TCU and Kansas obviously in the finals. I did pick Kansas, unfortunately, to win the championship. So not too homerish of me. Picking TCU to go all the way. It would be awesome, of course, to see that happen, but I picked Kansas to win the Big 12 tournament. I believe I picked Jalen Wilson to be the tournament MVP just because I think he's the best player in the conference, so why not?
Yeah, conference player of the year, deservedly. I think that's, if you're the only one that picks Kansas, I think you're probably feeling pretty good about your chances to come out on top if we were placing bets on things. So that's it. I mean, Selection Sunday is coming up Sunday, so we're going to know everything about what the NCAA tournament looks like. We're going to have all kinds of content coming out about that, and it's just the best. I love the NCAA tournament, and the bracket reveal and all of that. We'll see what kind of team TCU ends up playing, and we'll break down everything from that think that's all I have for basketball. You ready to move on to the next one?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. So TCU baseball over the weekend. I guess for the week, 2-2 on the week. Probably not what you wanted, but over the weekend went 2-1 in the Shriners Children's College Classic in Minute Maid Park there in Houston, Texas. Games against Michigan, Louisville, and Rice. 2 wins on the weekend were shutout wins, stellar pitching to take down Michigan 6-0, just continuing to own the entire athletic department of the Michigan Wolverines. Love to see it. And then also winning on Sunday against Rice 7-0, but taking the loss on Saturday in a tight one 2-3 against Louisville. Got to be honest, Russ, I was not able to watch any of this baseball over the weekend. I was at a wedding. Shout out Myra and Justin. Congratulations. But what happened this weekend and how's TCU baseball looking? You know, TCU is still high up in the rankings, number 10, but feels like dropping a few of these games here.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the pitching was stellar for TCU over the weekend. And I think what's most exciting is Ryan Vanderhei right now is looking like the ace of the staff. And that was a big question mark, I think, for TCU coming in, is after you lose Riley Cornelio and Marcelo Perez and some of those veteran pitchers like Austin Krob from last year's roster, who are the guys that are going to step up and be your starters on weekends and pitch consistently well? Ryan Vanderhei has made 3 starts. He's made 3 quality starts, and this was by far his best outing of the season. I believe he threw 6 innings. He got his first win in a TCU uniform, struck out 8 batters, I believe, and just looked in full command of this game. And then Luke Savage came on in relief and threw 3 shutout innings to earn the save. Anytime you throw 3 innings or more in relief and close out the game, you automatically earn the save. Just a fun little tidbit for those who don't know baseball statistics. It doesn't have to be a close game. Just throw those 3 innings, lock it up, and you get a nice little S by your name. But Luke Savage looked good. I think this is his, arguably his best outing of the year, too. I know he started about a week ago and didn't look very good in his start, but he pitched well in relief in this game. And Austin Davis homered, Cole Fontenelle homered. So TCU's shown a little bit of power as well over the weekend at the plate. The Louisville game, Louisville is also ranked near the top as well. That was a high-level matchup, TCU's biggest matchup of the weekend, and I think you have to be – it's a tough loss, but I think you have to be pleased with a few things. Number one, you had 3 freshmen pitch in this game. Cole Klecker, who's been really good to start the year, he got the start and was able to work around quite a few jams. He gave up 9 hits in 4 innings, but he only gave up 2 runs. So to be able to not panic and get out of trouble multiple times was really impressive to see. And then Chase Hoover, another freshman, came in through 4 innings of shutout relief. Ben Abel, another freshman left-hander, came in through 1 inning at the end of the game and was able to get out of a jam. I believe he gave up a couple hits and a walk and was able to get out of it without allowing a run. So Carson Bowen, the freshman catcher who's been drawing a lot of starts recently behind the plate, he homered in this game. This was his first home run at the college level. I think he's a kid that's got a really bright future for TCU. Anthony Silva obviously was the freshman shortstop coming in, who a lot of people talked about as a big-time player in the waiting. Big 12 freshman of the year before the season. But Carson Bowen looks pretty good right now at the plate, and TCU's getting a big boost from him offensively. Sunday against Rice, Cam Brown pitched really well. 7 innings, struck out 8 guys, showed some really good stuff. Fastball was in the mid-upper 90s for most of the day. Really encouraging to see that from Cam Brown, and hopefully he can continue to pitch at a high level along with Ryan Vanderhei, because if those 2 guys, not saying they're going to go 7 innings and strike out 8 guys every single outing, but if those 2 guys can give TCU quality starts, on a weekend to weekend basis, that's going to be huge for this team's success. So a shout out to Cam Brown for pitching really well. Luke Boyers has had a pretty rough start to the season. 5 strikeout game, I believe, against Dallas Baptist. He's struck out in about 40 to 45% of his at bats this year, but he had a nice game against Rice. Home run to left field, a 3-run bomb. Brody Green's a player who hasn't really earned a lot of reps. He came off the bench and had a nice day at the plate as well. I think he actually started the game at one of the infield spots and had a nice day for the Frogs. So a good win to close the weekend out on a high note. TCU's had 2 series now this year where they've gone to an MLB ballpark and came away with a winning record. So good to see that from the Frogs rising to the occasion, but unfortunately did not rise to the occasion against UT Arlington on Tuesday, losing that one 8-7. Fell behind 8-2. The defense has, for lack of a better way of saying it, been really crappy to start off the season. 18 errors already for TCU in 12 games. They're 7-5, but 18 errors in 12 games. You're averaging almost 2 errors a game. Fielding percentage is almost below 960. That's not remotely close to being good enough. And some of these younger guys, Silva's had a few errors. Carson Bowen has had some errors behind the plate, and they're freshmen. It's a learning curve. I think they'll adjust and continue to improve, but Braden Taylor has 3 errors already. David Bishop has 3 errors already. Those are your 2 corner infielders. Those are key spots defensively, and those are guys that you wouldn't expect to be burping the ball up around the infield. So they got to tighten it up on the corners for sure. But the defense is a bit of a question mark right now. But Sam Stoutenborough, the Cal transfer, pitched well in relief. I think he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, so he didn't pitch last weekend against Florida State. But he did pitch just over 3 innings in this game against UT Arlington. Braden Sloan got the start and had a couple of really solid midweek starts to open up the season, was maybe due for a rough outing and gave up 5 runs in this game, didn't make it out of the second inning. But Sam Stoutenborough came in relief, pitched well. Justin Hackett, another freshman, pitched well in relief, in addition to Sam Stoutenborough. So the pitching toward the back end of the game kept the Frogs around. TCU scored 3 runs in the 7th inning, 1 in the 8th, and 1 in the 9th. Cole Fontenelle, I believe, stepped up with a pinch hit double to make it a 1-run game, and then he was pulled for a pinch runner. The runner advanced to third on a wild pitch, so the tying run was 90 feet away. Luke Boyers came up to the plate, and to his credit, he had a nice day. He was 3 for 5 in total, but struck out with 2 outs in the 9th inning and a runner on third. That ended the game. So 2-2 over 4 games, like you said, and I think the Arlington loss is a tough one, especially because of the defensive mistakes. And I think the box score said TCU only had 1 error, but really it could have been like 3 or 4. There were a few plays on the infield where, if they call it another way, it's probably an error. But that's, I think, the biggest key right now for this team is they've been able to score runs pretty consistently. The pitching from the freshmen especially has been pretty solid, but that defense has got to get better. 18 errors in 12 games, that's not going to cut it. So we'll see if they can get back on track there with the series coming up this weekend against San Diego.
Yeah, a few things just from the statistics thus far through the season. You talk through the errors really stand out. I think a couple other things that, I don't know if we're going to need to see a shakeup in the lineup or just batting order or something, but we've got Luke Boyers and David Bishop each with 16 strikeouts already, each hitting 250 or under for the season. Just not really good enough. Carson Bowen is stepping in and doing a great job, at the plate. and behind the plate. I think he's caught several stealing, but also thrown a few away and given away runs that way. So, but his bat has been so much stronger than Curtis Burns. Curtis Burns already 4 double plays he's grounded into. He's hitting 186 for the season. So, I think some of those guys who you're expecting to come back and be that experience, that leadership from last season to carry that forward this year, and turns out TCU's leaning a lot more on these freshmen and newcomers to really get the job done, which they're doing admirably. And certainly, I mean, TCU's ranked number 10 in the country. It's not like the sky is not falling because you lose a 1-run game in a midweek to UT Arlington. That's not where we're headed here. But I guess to give the silver lining of stuff that's happened thus far this season, TCU's getting it on the base paths. I mean, the stolen bases on the season, only caught stealing 7 times across 26 attempts, is really good. And seeing even the young guys, seeing Anthony Silva get out there and get 3 stolen bases already through this season, it's just, I think TCU will settle into this season, will settle into a lineup and to a rotation that will continue into the Big 12 part of this season and into the postseason. So I don't think any major things to worry about at this point. But looking ahead to the San Diego series this weekend, unfortunately, San Diego has now lost 6 in a row. They came out on a really hot start, taking 3 of 4 from Nebraska, and going into, I guess they ended up calling it a tie. They were tied 16-16. I was looking at this box score. It was wild, but in 7 innings, they just ended the game. I guess weather canceled it, but I think this is one where TCU getting into the swing of things of a normal old weekend series. We saw it with the Florida State series that TCU wasn't super great. A lot of problems there to come up with a series loss. But here with San Diego, I think this is this is a series TCU has to go and win. And you'd love to see a sweep in Lupton this weekend.
Yeah, and you talked about a couple of the complementary hitters in TCU's lineup, like Luke Boyers and Curtis Burns, who are off to a bit of a slow start. And I think it's still pretty early in the season. We still have about a week or so before we get into Big 12 play. And as far as the depth is concerned, Cole Fontenelle is hopping around. He's been a DH. He's played in the outfield. He's played third base. But outside of him and maybe someone like a Brody Green, I really don't know how much confidence Kirk Sarloos and his staff have in some of these other position players. Logan Maxwell really hasn't played a whole lot, if not at all. Jake Dewar is a freshman who's hardly played. So it's going to be really important for some of these complementary hitters like Byrne and Boyers to get into a rhythm. And I have the confidence that they will. We've seen Luke Boyers be able to hit for average before. He did it really well as a freshman. We know Curtis Byrne can hit the ball well. Some of those double plays, there's going to be some positive regression there, I think. But it's really important that some of those complementary guys who they may not have the most important slots in the lineup, like an Austin Davis or Braden Taylor or Elijah Nunez, but they help keep the machine going. When you have guys that you could stick at the bottom of your lineup, like Anthony Silva, who's hitting well over 300, 8-game hitting streak to start the season before the injury, which hopefully he comes back from that sooner rather than later. I was told that it was a hamstring injury, so hopefully not serious there. Hopefully he gets back out there. And in the meantime, Braden Taylor is starting at shortstop instead of third base. But Um, this is a series, I think, where some of those hitters like Boyers and Byrne and Bishop will have an opportunity to try and get back on track, as well as the midweek game next week before TCU starts to get into Big 12 play. And you brought up the base stealing. I think that was a big thing when TCU went out and brought in Austin Davis. To have Austin Davis and Elijah Nunez at the top of your lineup, two guys that combined for 60 stolen bases last year, you knew coming in that TCU was going to have two guys at the top of the order who not only can rake, but draw walks and get on base. And that's another thing. Austin Davis has drawn a lot of walks at the top of that order. So to have him and Nunez up there being active on the base paths and setting the table for some of these other guys like Braden Taylor and Trey Richardson, I don't think hasn't really been talked about enough this year. He's had some really nice at-bats come through, some really clutch hits. He's been a little bit lower in the lineup, typically around 5, 6, 7 in the lineup, but he's been moving up with some of the injuries and struggles some of these other guys have had. So looking for him to continue to do big things. And honestly, even Braden Taylor himself has been a little bit slow because I feel like teams, to be quite honest, aren't
They're
giving
pitching
him,
around
they're,
him.
they're not giving him very competitive at bats. Yeah, we saw last week several games where you see TCU's guys get 4 or 5 at bats and he's getting 2 at bats because he's drawn 2 or 3 walks. So it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in that you're getting a free pass and you're getting a runner on base, but if guys like David Bishop and Luke Boyers and Curtis Byrne, who are hitting after him, aren't cashing in on those opportunities, then you just see big numbers in the LOB, left on base category. And hopefully we'll see that turn around this weekend. I know there have been some games where TCU's left some guys on base, but this is a weekend coming up where guys who have had some struggles will definitely have an opportunity to start to generate some positive momentum going into Big 12 play.
Yeah, speaking of positive momentum, we'll transition over to football for the NFL Combine. Our Horned Frogs were very well represented in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine. There for their big job interviews and really put on a strong showing. Those who did the drills, not everyone ran. I think Kendre Miller and Quentin Johnston didn't really do the workouts, maybe some of the drills, but not a 40-yard dash. But for the guys that did run and work out, I think a lot of guys made a lot of noise, made a lot of money, really good performances across the board. Max Duggan was the fastest quarterback of the group. So that's exciting to see. And I think a lot of people making a lot of money, I guess, is to what to say. I think everyone is going up the draft boards. Travius Hodges Tomlinson as well continues to get the, going into those Senior Bowl weeks where the Senior Bowl directors and personnel people were like, well, he's too short to be able to play football in the NFL. We only want people who are going to get drafted. Well, I think it's pretty clear that from the feedback out of the combine that Tomlinson will be drafted and will be drafted pretty high. He put on another good show. What else do we see from the combine, Russ?
Just the speed and athleticism from these TCU players was something that really stood out to me. And when I looked up these guys, all 9 of them who participated, most of any team in the Big 12, tied for third most among all Division I programs. NFL Next Gen Stats was a measurement that was used to rank these players for all the players that participated in the combine. When I looked up these TCU athletes, they were all in the top 10, top 15 for their position groups in terms of their athletic rankings, like their athletic scores, what they did in the 40, in the broad jump, vertical, shuttle drills, cone drills. The 40 times were, I think, the most impressive for sure. Darius Davis, we know that he's fast, but he ran a 4.36. Super impressive stuff from him. And he ran that back-to-back consistently in the 4.3 range. So sometimes you see a player run a 40 and then the next 40 is a couple ticks slower, but he was consistently in the 4.3 range. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson ran a 4.41 and had some really awesome combine workouts. He was top 10, top 8 amongst all cornerbacks in several combine drills. D. Winters ran a 4.49. Came in a little bit smaller than I thought he played at TCU. I think he came in at 5'11", 227. I felt like he was closer to in the 230s, maybe closer to 240 listed on TCU's website. But a guy who I think is going to find a role as an outside linebacker and possibly as a pass rushing linebacker off the outside with his speed. 8.5 sacks this year for TCU. Max Duggan running a 4.52, one of the fastest times for a quarterback. I will say I did watch some of his throwing drills. He did not look the most comfortable in some of the throwing drills. We saw some of those classic Max Duggan mannerisms with some of the happy feet and some of the overthrows, ball coming out a little bit too hot, but the athleticism you can't deny for him and some of these other players. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, you mentioned him. He's one of the smallest guys amongst all the defensive backs, but I think the biggest difference between him and someone like an Ardarius Washington from a few years ago, and this isn't a knock on Ardarius Washington, but Travius Hodges-Tomlinson as an athlete, I think is just a different animal. His speed, his coverage ability, he's an awesome athlete, and I think he's someone who made some money during the combine. I think he's going to be an early day 3 draft pick, someone who could go in the 4th round. The player who I think out of all the TCU guys who worked out, and my guess is this is someone who's probably going to be talked about a little bit more before the draft in April, Steve Avila looked pretty damn good. He tested well in all of his combine workouts, looked really comfortable doing the lineman drills, and I've read some reports that say he's as high as a 2nd round grade, like an early 2nd round grade in terms of just overall prospect rankings. So Ryan Poles, general manager of the Chicago Bears, I know you have Baltimore's 2nd round pick. Please take Steve Avila if he is there. You need some interior line help, and I think this is one of the best interior linemen in this draft. He's got great size for that interior at 6'4", 330, all-American type player. He can play center. He can play guard. I know this comes from a TCU guy, but use that 2nd rounder on Steve Avila if he's there. Steve Avila had a really nice weekend. Kendre Miller, Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston did the vertical. I believe it was 40.5 inches, and then he did a 11-foot 2-inch broad jump, amongst the best among wide receivers. Did not run the 40. Kendre Miller did not do any combine workouts. He did do interviews. Not sure if there's a injury situation there or he just chose not to work out, but TCU's Pro Day is coming up. It's March 30th. So we'll have another chance to see some of these TCU guys participate in combine drills for the Pro Day. My guess is we'll probably see Kendre Miller and Quentin Johnston work out more on the Pro Day, and then we'll have the NFL Draft coming up April 27th through the 29th. So overall, I thought it was a pretty successful weekend for TCU football players. I didn't think anybody really hurt their stock by any means. No one came out with any injuries. Unfortunately, there were a couple players from other programs who went down with some injuries, but the Frogs got through it injury-free, tested really well. Athleticism definitely stood out. Speed definitely stood out. I think you have to be really pleased if you're a you're a TCU fan.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking at the NFL mock draft database for Steve Avila right now, and looks like consensus is 34 overall to the Arizona Cardinals. So,
Well, they need some offensive line help too. So I think
but
there are a lot of teams in the early part of these rounds. When you look at some of these teams that have high picks, the Bears, the Cardinals, the Colts, the Falcons, I think maybe up there as well. The Raiders, all of their lines suck. They're all terrible. So they could use whatever help they can get. And some of those interior guys, you see a lot of tackles go earlier in the first round, whereas some of the interior guys, guards, centers, not as premium of a position. They tend to fall more toward the middle, back end of the first round, if not early second round. So Steve Avila in the first round, you'd love to see it. I'd hope it happens, but early second round, if he continues to do what he's doing right now, especially after having an awesome performance at the Senior Bowl, really excited to see what he does in the NFL.
for sure, looking forward to all that, and also looking forward. I think we got a spring game date locked in of April 14th. I think I saw that somewhere as an official announcement. That's a Friday night. I think that's how Sonny Dykes likes to do it, is like a Friday night football thing there. So Friday Night Lights. I hope I'm right on that.
Yeah,
I don't know. I was just looking
looked
that
it up, and I see a post from BetMGM 2023 TCU football spring game scheduled for Friday, April 14th at Amon G. Carter. Why it's BetMGM, I don't know.
Maybe I wonder what the line is.
Maybe,
what's the spread on
purple team,
over under 3 touchdowns from Chandler Morris? Okay,
purple team favored by 3.5 over white team.
Thanks, BetMGM. Okay, we'll move on and wrap up with a few other awesome things that are happening around TCU athletics. So, men's tennis, your indoor national champions, continue to be ranked number 1 in the team rankings, and pretty much every singles player and every doubles pair is ranked in the ITA rankings themselves. This week took down UT Arlington 7-0 in its outdoor opener, moving to 13-0 overall, continuing its undefeated season and number 1 overall ranking. This weekend, with number 34 UCLA coming into Fort Worth to the Purple Courts on Saturday afternoon, another opportunity. If the weather's nice here in Fort Worth, get yourself out there and check out the best tennis team in the country. Elsewhere, also number 1, because TCU is just the best at everything, of course, is the rifle team and the beach volleyball team, both ranked at number 1. Currently, rifle headed into the NCAA championships this weekend, so looking to put some more trophies into the trophy case there for the rifle team. Beach volleyball is really getting its season just underway. Has opened the season undefeated and looked good in a couple of weekend matchups. But this weekend, head to back here to Fort Worth for 4 matches this weekend, Friday and Saturday, to each, including a match each day against number 4 LSU, who is also undefeated. So for all this, I'll say on Saturday, what you should do, you should plan your entire day to just spend it with the Frogs. Be on campus. You've got beach volleyball, 2 matches starting at 10:30 and then at 12:45. You could go straight from there over to the tennis facility to catch the match with UCLA at 1 o'clock, and then baseball starts at 2. And then once baseball's over, Big 12 championship, go ahead and catch the Frogs taking down Kansas or Baylor or whomever on the Big 12 championship, and make it a day for TCU this Saturday.
I'm just thinking about it now, man. If I could just hop on a plane this weekend and catch a flight down, go get a workout in at the rec in the morning, walk out, enjoy the weather, and enjoy some beach volleyball, burn some more calories by walking over to the tennis courts, get some cheap baseball tickets, and then how about closing it out at Buffalo Bros, watching some Big 12 championship basketball.
It's a perfect day.
I'm getting some serious nostalgia flowing in at the moment.
All right. That's all I have for this week's Frogs of War podcast. Really appreciate everyone listening and following us on Twitter, on Facebook, YouTube. In the comments section, the game threads. We'll be back with a game thread for this game on Thursday. So those of you who were missing out on that this weekend while I was at a wedding, sorry about that. But as always, we appreciate the engagement and enjoy covering all of these teams and all of the great things happening around TCU. And with that, I'll sign off. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.